Welcome back, Focus Learners. Let's jump right in because today we are unpacking a truly fascinating, highly esoteric text from 2004 called Elementary Cultivation. It's authored by a figure known as Zhu Feng. Now, this is a massive, sprawling 23-point manual that outlines a very specific and honestly, sometimes totally unconventional path to shedding mortal attachments and reaching a celestial state. It literally blends the Taoist heart, the Buddhist heart, and the Christ heart into one single doctrine. So today we're going to break down the author's precise instructions on exactly how to navigate the physical world so you can ultimately transcend it. Okay, let's dive into this. Our journey today is structured into 4 key stages. First up, the philosophy of non-action. Then, emulating the elements. Followed by cosmic order and karma. And finally, fulfilling earthly duties. So, starting us off with Part 1, the philosophy of non-action. Now, you might be familiar with the traditional concept of wu-wei or non-action, but the author here takes it to an absolute extreme in daily life. The core idea is that you flow naturally with your environment with zero forcing and zero desperation for a specific outcome. The text basically says, if society needs you to be a cleaner, you willingly accept it. If circumstances line up and you become a billionaire, you don't refuse it. If you're feasting on delicacies today, but tomorrow you're down to just pickles and water, well, you do so without an ounce of resentment or comparison to others. The whole goal is to act or stop entirely based purely on your environment. You remain completely unbothered by wealth, poverty, praise, or insults. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast the text draws between your ordinary person and a true cultivator. The author argues that ordinary folks use schemes, which, let's be real, usually just weave traps for themselves. They make promises, which the text actually considers incredibly dangerous. Why? Because life is so impermanent. If you fail to keep a promise, it instantly turns into a shackle of lies. A cultivator, on the flip side, lives with total clarity. They have absolutely zero ambition to do things like glorify their ancestors or build some massive legacy. They make no promises, and they absolutely refuse to compare their path to anyone else's, completely avoiding that heavy fog of worldly anxiety. To actually achieve this state of non-action, the text advises seeking lightness in literally every single aspect of your life. For instance, the author points out that intense, fiery friendships can turn sour in an instant and hurt the heart. So friendships should be understated, as light as water. Your diet should be light too. You're supposed to avoid strong tea, alcohol, and extreme flavors to protect your body's internal harmony. You're even instructed to avoid physical extremes. No standing, sitting, or even looking at things for too long. By shrinking your desires and living strictly in the present moment, the author posits that you shrink your troubles, calm your mind, and open the door to real spiritual wisdom. Moving right along to Part 2, emulating the elements. The first elemental metaphor here is wood and stone. The author explicitly warns that if you are constantly worrying about the suffering of ordinary people or getting caught up in world events, you will never ever find the peace required to perceive the Tao. Instead, you have to observe the world, whether that's the chirping of bugs and birds or the shouting of people, with a completely cold, unmoved eye. From a higher dimensional perspective, the text argues that everything in our world is really just a fleeting, colorful bubble. You literally have to develop a heart of wood and stone so you don't get trapped inside it. Next up, a cultivator needs to become like clouds, just drifting with the wind, totally shapeless. The text describes this as floating through life without being weighed down for a second by concepts of honor or disgrace. You don't even linger on beautiful scenery. You nourish things when you happen to have water, you release a lightning bolt when you meet friction, and then you just borrow the sun's heat and disappear back into the vast universe. It is this wild vision of absolute unburdened freedom. Then we get to the metaphor of ice. And the text makes a really fascinating assertion here. Heat and fire cause things to burn and rot, right? Well, the author uses that to represent the intense human emotions of love, hate, and separation. But ice preserves. Ice is constant. The author is urging the reader to achieve a heart like ice, even if ordinary people look at you and think you're a cold-blooded animal or just a total weirdo. This kind of emotional freezing is seen as an absolute necessity to preserve your spiritual self. Finally, to wrap up the elemental sequence, the text circles back to that classic Taoist concept of water. It's formless, yet it's capable of creating massive waves. It's completely pure, yet it has the ability to wash away all dirt. It perfectly represents the ultimate paradox of this cultivation path. By achieving total humility and absolute zero personal desire, you actually tap into this quiet, monumental power that all things have to rely upon. Now, what's really interesting about this next stage is how specific the rules get. This is part 3, cosmic order and karma. As we shift from these philosophical metaphors into the actual cosmic machinery, the foundational rule you need to know is the law of no opponents. You are strictly forbidden from fighting heaven, earth, or people. You don't fight heaven because, well, humans are tiny and we can't even predict our own illnesses. You don't fight earth because nature is a perfectly interconnected chain. The author actually notes that artificially killing insects just ruins the soil and the sky, basically digging humanity's own grave. And lastly, you do not fight people. If you get bullied, exploited, or slandered, you must ignore it. Exactly like a mountain ignores a rainstorm. Why? Because the text argues that karma is an iron law. It is precise to the absolute smallest detail. Any retaliation on your part just disrupts this perfect web of cause and effect. And this strict adherence to the cosmic order actually extends to personal power too. The text claims that as a practitioner's mind gets purer, supernatural functions will naturally start to manifest. We're talking things like walking on water, passing through walls, or moving objects with your mind. But the author issues a really intense esoteric warning here. If you unlock these abilities, you must never, ever show them off. Because if you reveal your power, society is going to immediately enslave you to its demands. You'll lose all your freedom, and your spiritual progress will be completely ruined. So the crucial point is how this exactness of karma applies to human suffering. According to the text's highly specific and admittedly controversial numerical data, only 1% of disease is caused by universal order. 9% is collectively made by humanity's pollution. 10% is hereditary, which they frame as the karmic result of your ancestors define the Tao. But then there's the big one. A massive 80% of all disease is entirely self-made, brought on by a person's own unrestrained diet, desires, and wild emotions. Because diseases are viewed largely as self-inflicted karmic debts, the text presents a pretty wild theological argument. A cultivator must never use their advanced supernatural abilities to miraculously cure other people. Now, going to a regular doctor, that's fine. That's in line with the Tao. But using special functions to wipe away an illness prevents the sufferer from balancing their cosmic ledger. The author argues that enduring the torment of a disease is exactly how a soul gains wisdom, realizes its mistakes, and repays its debts to heaven and earth. So magically curing them would literally rob them of this necessary spiritual evolution. Let's move to the next stage and see how this builds. Part 4, fulfilling earthly duties. Because after all this intense talk about shutting the world and having a heart of ice, the text hits us with a massive caveat. To cultivate to become a celestial, one must first cultivate to be a human. This means celestial ascension is strictly 100% barred until all of your physical human obligations are perfectly and exhaustively settled. You have to leave with zero regrets and absolutely zero debts. The author outlines 4 mandatory earthly steps to make this happen. Step 1 is the absolute top priority, perfect filial piety toward your parents. The text insists that no matter what your spiritual goals are, failing to honor the parents who gave you life is an inescapable sin, period. Step 2 is your children. You must take full responsibility for your offspring until they are 18, pouring your heart into raising them. Step 3 is doing your absolute best by your spouse, society, and nature so you leave zero regrets behind. But it's the 4th step, duty to the self, where the text takes its most provocative turn. The text argues that you can't just forcefully repress your mortal desires. If you just push them down, it leaves an itch in your heart, which keeps your ego alive and well. Instead, the author advises that you must actively satiate your physical vices until you are thoroughly disgusted by them. The examples they give are intense. If you want to gamble, you gamble until you feel the bitter self-hate of losing. If you want to drink, you drink until you vomit. If you want to swear, you swear until society looks at you with total contempt. Even if you're just curious about eating cockroach meat, the text literally says to feast on it until you're nauseous. The theory here is that only by fully indulging these urges will you finally realize they're tasteless and worthless, and that's what allows you to finally extinguish the ego. And that brings us to the ultimate paradox presented by this incredible source material. Think about it. It teaches absolute detachment, developing a heart of ice, and floating through life like a shapeless cloud, yet it simultaneously demands that you first honor your parents perfectly, raise your children diligently, and even plunge headfirst into your darkest vices until you are literally sick of them. It leaves us with such a fascinating, provocative thought to chew on. To truly transcend the world, must we first fully, exhaustively experience it? Thank you so much for joining me on this Explainer Focused Learners. Keep asking questions, and I'll catch you next time.